People get a little anxious. It's like, oh, I like sitting and listening. I don't know about this, exercises where we're going to, really start to practice how to communicate, how to tell our story. But truly, just like Mary's example this morning, that's what we all need to get to at some point. And whether this afternoon you're going to start to dabble a little bit in how to tell your story, or maybe you're just going to start jotting down some notes and begin thinking about how you're going to write a letter more persuasively to your legislator. But all of us need to be moving down this path of becoming more engaged and active advocates. So this afternoon we're really excited because this year, as we've been planning this workshop, we've been working with Gary Sandusky, who many of us have known. He works with the Idaho Citizens Action Network, but he's also involved with an organization that works throughout the Northwest, especially in Montana, our neighboring state, but it's the Center on Community Change. And Gary has been around, his white hair might show a little bit, but he's been around a long, long time as a community organizer, and he's a senior organizer who works a lot and has done a tremendous amount through the years across this country. And so we're very excited to have Gary involved in doing this workshop today. So with that, Gary Sandusky.
Who was that guy she was just talking about? My name's Gary Sandusky. I live here in Boise. I foster grassroots organizing and grassroots participation in the decisions that affect our lives, from Montana to the Dakotas to here in Idaho, Ohio. I've worked all over the Northwest. And so what I'd like to do with you all today is to move this workshop from you being receivers of information to all of us being in this together, because that's what it's going to take to change the policies that are negatively impacting us. It takes my energy and your energy and their energy and all of our energy. So we're going to move from information to participation. And I need to do a couple of provisos here. All of this stuff was not invented by me. I have to give credit to the folks who helped develop these materials. There's a guy named Marshall Gans from the Kennedy School of Government, Idaho Parents Unlimited. I borrowed their materials. And then Disability Rights of Idaho also contributed materials to what I'm going to talk about. So the goals of this session are that you're going to learn the basics of telling your story and how that works in grassroots advocacy. We're going to get your feet wet telling that story. I want to make sure that everybody has the worksheet handout, which I failed to include in the packet. Did everybody get that at the door? If you don't have it, raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, little clicker. You're going to learn to put together a story about yourself, about who you are, about the things you care about, what you think needs to be done, and why you feel the need to speak out about it. I'm behind, aren't I? Now, this is just one way to do it. So I'm just asking you to have an open mind. After the workshop, if you think this stinks and it's not something you want to do, then don't do it this way. You can accept it or reject it. It's certainly not the only way to talk to your legislator. But we do know that during the 2011 legislative session, specific parts of HB 221, which then became HB 60, were eliminated, largely based on the testimony that the legislators heard. Because they heard from the people who were going to be hurt by the cuts, who were going to be impacted by the cuts, and they went in and surgically removed those things that moved them. And that's our power as grassroots people, is our ability to speak from the heart. That's what we know about. We know about ourselves, we know about our families, we know about our experiences. Nobody's going to expect you to be a Medicaid expert, but you are an expert in your own lives and the experience of the people you love. And that's an emotional power, which is really different than the intellectual power. So why does storytelling work? Because you may not think about it this way, but each of us has a story that can move others. And that's the point. Not only legislators, but we need more people in this room. We need to fill every seat in this room. And how do we get there? We get there by each of us influencing those around us and encouraging them to come out and be engaged. So stories draw on our values and emotions. They show our values in action, and they help us feel what matters. And as I was thinking about getting up here today, I was thinking about how to demonstrate that. So here's one approach to an issue. We know that 43,000 Idahoans were impacted by the loss of dental services in Medicaid. Okay, let that sit there for a while. We're doing a storybook right now. I'm reading stories about people who have had their teeth pulled because that was the only option. I read a story about a man who had all of his teeth pulled, and then they passed the loss of dental services in the last legislative session. Now he has none. The plan was for him to have dentures. Now, feel that for a minute. That's really different than data about 43,000 people. That's the human experience. That's what we're trying to get to. It's really different than just thinking about what matters. It's about feeling what matters and being able to communicate what matters. Medicaid matters. So here's a way to think about, oops, I jumped a slide. Values get to motivation. Values and emotion are more likely to move people to action than just information. Here's the way this works. And again, it's not the only way, but it's one way. The beginning of the story is, who are you? And you need to say more than, I'm Gary Sandusky and I'm from Boise, Idaho, because I just told you almost nothing. Who are you and what are some of the more details about your life so that the person you're talking to has some reason to understand why they should listen to you? It doesn't matter if I'm Gary Sandusky and I live in Boise, Idaho. What do I have to say? And why would this person want to listen to me? Why do I have any credibility? What place or perspective am I speaking from? You don't need to go on into all the raggedy details about your life, but enough to give people a sketch of who you are and where you come from. Why do you care? What do you care about enough to speak up about? You know, why are you standing in front of the legislator? Maybe it's about your own experience with the loss of Medicaid services or other services. Maybe it's something that's happening in your family. Maybe it's about what's happening with the people you provide services to. Maybe it's about what's happening to your friends in your community. But they need to understand why you're there. So who are you and why are you there? And then the middle of the story is really where you get down to defining the problem and giving some specific examples. What isn't working with your family, in your own life related to this issue of Medicaid? And some really specific examples. And then what solutions are we suggesting? And I'm moving through this fairly quickly because you may discover that you have 3 minutes or 5 minutes to catch your legislator in the hall on their way to a committee meeting. And so you don't have a half-hour conversation necessarily. It's kind of hard, especially during the middle of the legislative session. It's kind of hard to get those longer conversations as an everyday citizen. So you need to compact your story into a shorter timeline. And then the end is just essentially, will they agree to try to solve the problem? This is where we all start to figure out where do we stand in relationship to this legislature. You know, where does legislator A stand? Where does legislator B stand? And we find that out by just asking them straight up, are you going to support us? Do they need more information? And again, when we're all doing this together, you don't necessarily have to be the Medicaid expert. The most important thing is to tell the truth. So if you don't know the answer, don't make it up. Tell them you'll find it out and you'll get back to them. And then if they're not willing to work on solving this problem, we need to understand why. Could give you a chance to engage them again and to try to move them. We need to understand what their problem is, what their objection is. So are folks following me? Okay. So I'm going to be my own volunteer again. And I'd like to tell you a story that starts with my own life and then moves to someone that I care a lot about, who's a recipient of personal care services, and then moves to what that all means. So I am Gary Sandusky, and I do live in Boise, Idaho. I'm the father of 3 adult children. I've been married for 38 years, and you'd have to ask my wife the question why she stuck with me for 38 years. I moved up here in '87 from Colorado, and I grew up in kind of harsh circumstances. I grew up in a 600-square-foot house in what used to be a coal mining town. My parents were the first non-mining family to move in. Tar paper walls, corrugated tin roof, wind would, blow through the windows. I remember my mother sticking little strips of rags under the doors and around the windows to keep the wind from coming in. Took a bath in a tin tub and used an outhouse until I was 10. Point of this is not to evoke your sympathy.